Hi, this is Fran again, and I'm here presenting the 4 washes of watercolor, and today we are doing part 3, which is the 3rd watercolor wash, and that is called Wet into Wet. It's probably the one that you will use the most and have the most fun with. So before we begin that lesson, I wanted to review with you the last lesson on the graduated washes. I had demonstrated doing that wash, and I did another layer of both of those gradated washes. It can be called either graduated or gradated, it doesn't matter. And so I went over it one more time after it was dry to get more of the vibrancy to the yellow and the blue. And you'll notice I even lifted some color to make it look more like water in the foreground. So, and there's a little more work that I probably would do on that rock formation back there, the island that the trees are on. But I want to show you one that I did complete that's similar to that. I have a picture of it for you. So there is another example of that, and hopefully it'll inspire you to get busy and practice your skills using that wash. Okay, so today, like I said, we were going to do the wet into wet wash, which is a lot of fun and gives you many surprises. Here's an example of one that I did a while back, and you can see what happens during this wash. You get some very interesting formations and puddling up and darker edges where it dried a little bit, but it's such a fun and wonderful wash that I think with a little practice you'll be able to master it. So I have my board here, and I will try to get this into position so you can see it. Okay, we've got the paints. I think you can see them now a lot better than you were the other day. So I wanted to make sure you had more visibility of what I was doing today. So I'm going to use my favorite brush again, that 1-inch flat brush for the wash. And what we're going to do is we're going to wet the entire surface, because this is, as we said, the wet into wet wash. So that's our first order. Get it nice and wet. I think I'll switch this to this side. Got a little speck on there, so we'll try to get that off before we go ahead. Now I'm going to go over it again, but in a vertical direction this time, just to make sure it's saturated. I saw that blotted up, a little drop got up in the blue, and I didn't want that to make a watermark, so I got rid of it. So I have, as you can see, some blue, some red, and some yellow off to the side. And I think I'll start with the blue. Put some of the blue up here. I'm going to pretend it's a sky, and look at how it kind of wants to flow downward. You need to have water for watercolor to work, right? So we'll put some red in there. And let's have it try to go into the blue some as well. I probably could have gotten that even a little wetter. So to make that happen, yeah, put a little bit more over here. Trying to get that to flow a little bit better. Add some yellow. Blow it in into the other one. Look what's happening to that down underneath. And because that was a little dry there, I'm going to try and get some, maybe I'll put a little bit more red in there. And see what's happening. Now I really got some paint in there. Maybe that was the trouble. I didn't have enough paint on there. So there you see the mingling of the paints. I'm going to get a little bit more red and maybe put it in here. Load my brush a little bit more. I think that red could have been, I could have added a little more water to it. Then take your board, if you want to, and tip it and see what happens. And you see how the colors mingle with one another. And I'm exaggerating the tilt now because I want to get that closer to you. I want to have it go to the as close to the bottom of that square as I can get it. But there you see how the colors mix right there on your paper and they flow. And I wish this were, look, oh, it is still a little damp. I'm going to put a little bit more color in that side. Let's get some more blue on that side too. You can see where the blue and the yellow are mixing there. Got some down below. Well, let's go with it. We're playing today, so this is good. So that's the wet into wet wash. And you can see it's better to have it juicier. The juicier, the better. Get more water on there, and don't be afraid to go back in while it's still wet and pour in more color. Well, I thought I thought to demonstrate a little bit more on that, I did have a, let me put this aside. I did have a sketch done when I was in up north in the Adirondacks, and on a little trip with a bunch of artists. And I did this sketch while I was sitting on the grass and looking out at the lake and the mountains on the other side of the lake. And my friend was sitting there reading a book, and I thought, oh, that'd be great to paint someday. So anyway, I thought just to help you out today, I would do a little bit of painting the sky so that you could see how I would go about using the wet into wet wash for the sky. And then I also will use it in the tree, just to demonstrate different ways that you can do it. The first thing I think I will do is to paint the tree in a flat wash, and then come back after it's dry and then do the wet into wet over it. So I think I'll try to do that first, and I'm going to use this is the Zoltan Szabo palette, but I have Jane Dobie's suggestions, her palette actually, in here, her colors, her transparent colors. She wrote a wonderful book called Making Colors Sing, and I learned an awful lot from her, and I would highly recommend you getting that book and learning more about color and transparency and actually in composition, the whole thing. But anyway, I'm going to use this palette to get started and to do the tree. I'll mix up some brown first. And because it's a flat wash, I don't need to wet the paper first. But I could. I can do it either way. Let's see, what should we do it with? Let me try these two. These are complementary colors, so they will give you a brown or a gray. So there's kind of a nice, isn't that a nice brown that you can, hopefully you can see that. I've got this lamp perhaps in the way. I'll move that for you. There we go. That's not good. Okay. Well, I'm taking away a little bit of the light, but anyway, so that you can see the brown. So I'm going to just do a flat wash over this tree. And I didn't do anything up above because that's going to be where the leaves are, so. Just a flat wash of brown paint on here. There's the main trunk. And a branch coming off of that up here. And then another one over here. Oops, that went a little bit out. So I can get that before it dries, before it dries. There we go. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to soften some of these edges here too. I'm going to make this kind of go. So I'm going to add, how you soften edges is you add water from the outside and go towards the edge that you want to soften. And that will not take very long to dry, so we'll just let that sit for a couple minutes. So let me get the dryer so we don't have to sit here watching water dry. Sorry about that. I kept going by the off button. Anyway, there we go. And that is good. That's good. So the other thing about wet into wet washes, you can do wet into wet washes all the way to the edge, or you can even take like a petal and put some water in that one petal and do your wet into wet to form the coloration of the petal. I have another painting I wanted to show you. That's a good example of wet into wet. Actually, even in the background, but hopefully it'll be able to be seen on this screen. Let's see. But you can see in the background is all wet into wet. The petals, see how they're wet into wet as well. And so those are the kinds of wonderful effects you can get with wet into wet painting. This painting is really a good example of wet into wet paintings. So for flowers, for landscapes, for anything, for portraits, I even used it when I did portraits. I did a couple of my grandkids. So let's get on here. That's all dry. And my clean water is here, so I'm going to put that there. I always try to have 2 containers of water. One to clean my brush with, so that's my dirty water, and then I dry it off, and then when I want, this is fresh water, when I want nice clean paint. And so the first thing I'm going to do is to get that area wet that I want to do my wet into wet wash in. And that's up here. I'm going to use this brush because I think it holds quite a bit of water. This is called a quill brush, and it's made by Mulier. And I think it's from Rome. Roma? No, Pluma. Pincel de Puma. So I'm adding water to the section. Now normally I would have this taped to my backing board, but I just didn't want to take the time to do that today. I just want to show you how to go about this, and hopefully you will be inspired and start trying this out on your own. Now I'm going to avoid that tree branch. Oops. Are you all right there? Technical problems here. Okay. I don't know how that happened, but somehow it got knocked down. But I guess we're all set, right? Can you see that now? Okay, I'm going to get this out of the way. I don't have a regular tripod to put my, I do have a tripod, but I didn't think it would work on here, so I have it kind of taped to another device. Let me get that better situated for you. I think that's okay, except for this. And I'll try to get more light on it. This is causing a shadow, isn't it? All right. Be prepared for the unexpected. I'm going to try not to get it on the tree branches, because then it would color that a different color. Just getting that nice and wet. Actually, don't go all the way to it. Stop before you get to the tree branch with your water. And the same with the hillside. I should have done that a little bit more carefully down here. But that's all right. If I blot it a little bit, by the time I get to it, hopefully it'll be dry. I see that this I kind of got carried away. That might have happened when the camera fell. So anyway, here we go. Now I'm going to wait just a few minutes to let the sheen come off, and maybe there might be some puddling. I do see a little bit of puddling over here. And I'll take a thirsty brush, which is a brush that doesn't have any water on it, and try to get some of that puddling off. And I see it's getting dry in that corner already, so I'm going to put some more water there. All right. It's a very hot day today, so that might be why the paper is drying so quickly. For all of you who don't know, I'm in Florida. So, and it's supposed to get into the 90s this afternoon. It's probably up there now. But fortunately, I live in a home that is air conditioned. And anyway, here we go. So I'm thinking I will put some blue across the upper edge, and then it'll be like there's like a sunset coming or something. Maybe it's close to later in the day, you know, just before sunset, maybe quite a bit before sunset, because there's still going to be quite a bit of light. So I'm keeping this brush. Let's try it. And I'm not tipping it, so let's get this up here. I am going to use this. There we go. Get some blue across the upper edge. Oops. Always nice to have one side a little darker than the other. You go back and forth. Let's see, I think I want more blue here, so I'll put some more blue there. Maybe there's some clouds in that sky. But I like the way the paint kind of variegates, kind of granulates, I guess is the better word for it. Get some yellow maybe right here. Oops, now that was unfortunate, but hopefully that won't cause too much of a problem. I got a little too much water on my brush when I tried to clean it. So I'm trying to make, you know, the rhythm of the sky. You want to repeat that red some other place. It doesn't have to be straight across, but you don't want to just have it on one side. So I'm going to touch some of this yellow, a little bit more vibrant yellow at the edge. Oops, I think that's where I went over a little bit, but that's all right. Yellow would be easy to cover up with another color later on for the background of the mountains there. doing wet into wet. Little reflections up there, maybe in some of the clouds. Get some more red in there because we want to carry that through. It doesn't have to be the same intensity as you go through. Oops. This is going to be where my leaves are, so I don't want to do too much over there. So I hope you get the idea of how that is done. A little more intense and maybe not quite such a straight line of the red there. So I think I'll leave that there and let it dry. And while that's drying, I'm going to show you now how to use the wet into wet. And by the way, this is going to dry a lot lighter than it is right now. In fact, I think maybe I'll just, while it's still wet, put a little bit more blue in there. See if I can't tip it a little bit more. Just notice you're going off to the side there. All right. Hopefully this video will be workable. Anyway, there we go. A little bit more blue because it was kind of fading quite a bit. So, you can always go back in while it's still wet. That's the important thing, while it's still wet. This is my darker side. This is my lighter side. And because that is the case, I'm going to add a little bit more yellow over there. Take a smaller brush this time. I can even maybe tip it that way, see what happens to it. Get some more up there. Tip it to the side. Now you understand why I said the paint will do what it wants to do. And anyway, that's the wet into wet. And now I'll go into the tree here. Now tree trunks aren't just brown, are they? They're really a multitude of color. There's red in there, there's blue, there's green, and brown and black. So let's make that happen on this tree. The tree trunk, anyway. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet a section here. And this also will give a shape to the tree. It'll give it dimension. And I'm going to, let me do it on this, my palette here. I'm going to mix some ultramarine blue. And I wish I had burnt sienna in here. Should have thought about that. Anyway, I've got this, and I'll have a little bit of this. A little bit of this. Let's see what we can come up with. Sort of like a burnt sienna, maybe a little more red. Burnt sienna has a lot of red tones in it. So, I'm going to put some, and add some ultramarine along the edge there. See already how that gives it dimension? Actually, I think I'm going to wet that whole thing, otherwise it might have a watermark. I'm going to wet the whole thing. And so this is wet into wet as well. So a little bit of ultramarine on both sides. I think I got it. Two. Of course, near the bottom, it's going to be thicker. There's more shadow near the bottom. There's also shadow up here at the crook of the tree. And these will probably be a little bit more in shadow on that side. Then I take that ultramarine, or this mixture I have of, I think that's quinacridone gold and ultramarine, and then a little bit of, rose madder to make this concoction that I did, which is a little bit like I'm going to add a little bit more red to it. I kind of lost the blue, so I'm going to go back in and put some more blue in it. Go back and forth, so it's wet into wet. Trying to get some more of that brown made too, maybe a little darker. Oop. I need more. Need a little more red. And so you go back and forth until you get the color that you want. A little more blue. A little more gold. That's getting close. There we go. I don't know whether you can see that or not. Hopefully. So, a little more brown. So we'll get some of the, kind of move that in here. Some more of that blue in there. Just keep going back and forth with your color. We want this to be more dark here on this side. I should say darker. And a little bit lighter on the other side, so I have a little bit more water to it to dilute it a little bit. That was a little too much, but a little more blue. And make sure we get some blue in there as it goes up and out. So there's your trunk. It's an interesting trunk. It has lots of color in it, and it was accomplished because you could do wet into wet wash. So I challenge you this week to take out your paints again and try the wet into wet wash. And we have one more lesson coming up, and that is the fourth wash, which is the streak wash, and that's another fun one. So till then, happy painting.